I usually don't write my speeches. I usually just talk way too long, and people finally just walk out. So today we're supposed to do this in 5 to 7 minutes. He says it's not 5 minutes, it's 7 minutes. So I'm going to try to read the speech in 5 to 7 minutes. And you know, my background basically is I've been a farmer, you know, most of my life. I grew up on a farm. And then I went to college because farms started failing in California, and got a PhD in anthropology and agriculture, studying tropical forest farmers. And then I got fired during the Vietnam War because I was teaching at University of California, and they accused me of burning the Bank of America. And today, of course, you get an award for that. In those days, of course, I got sentenced to a year in jail. I didn't finally convict us of burning the bank. But anyway, so my background has pretty much been activism and research and farming all my life. And after 100 arrests, we still haven't solved all the problems, surprisingly. And I've been arrested in Bernie's office and Welson's office and Leahy's office, and maybe next door to you, who knows. Anyway, it doesn't always work, but it is impactful. It does have impact. So the other thing that's really impactful is the agriculture that we do, and we run a farm with 127 acres, and it's all organic. It's been organic for this is the 14th year. It's been organic. But what I want to talk about today, real quickly, is just a background on what's going on with climate change and that relationship to agriculture. So worldwide animal agriculture is responsible for at least 51% of greenhouse gas emissions. Nobody's talking about this. A large percentage of these gases come from synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, pesticides, and confined animal operations, all of which emit high amounts of methane and nitrous oxide gases, which are the worst greenhouse gases. Unfortunately, most of our efforts on curbing climate change have been and still are focused on energy, transportation, and industrial pollutants. However, the combined emissions from these three sectors emit less greenhouse gases than farming. But no one hardly ever talks about agriculture as being the worst greenhouse gas emitter. When was the last time you heard that agriculture was more than half of the climate change problem? Maybe this is the first time. In order to change the energy, transportation, and industrial sectors, new infrastructure is required. That changeover is beginning, but it will probably take from 35 to 50 years. By contrast, in order to change agriculture, it only takes a mind shift. The infrastructure for a sustainable agriculture already exists. That change in attitude and our habits with respect to food and farming has already begun. Each year, more U.S. consumers are choosing organic food and better working conditions for farm laborers, demanding fair trade food and the humane treatment of animals. But because of the damage to the planet from bad farming practices, eating habits of the general population need to change, and they need to change quickly. Let me give you an example of how fast change in habits can happen. In the late 1970s, more than 40% of the U.S. population smoked tobacco. Now less than 17% smoke. That is a drop of 57.5% in 35 years. That required a mind shift, a change in attitude, and a change in our habits. Those changes in smoking were spurred by the realization that tobacco kills. Finally realized that. I'm here today to tell you that our current system of farming, and it's not just humans that are being killed and made ill, our form of agriculture is damaging the planet. Much of the corporate rationale for this form of agriculture is that farmers are feeding the hungry of the world and providing U.S. consumers with cheap food. Neither of these arguments is true. We import about as much food as we export, and the number of hungry mouths in the world is not decreasing, it is increasing. And U.S. consumers are not getting cheap food. The cheapest food in the U.S. is organic food because you only pay for it once. Consumers often pay for chemically produced food 5 times. Let me just run those down for you. The down payment is when you first buy the stuff at the supermarket. The second payment is the tax payment. It comes every April for farm subsidies, and 80% of all the food we eat in this country is processed food. And that processed food is corn, cotton, soy, canola, rice, wheat, and sugar. Those crops eat up 98% of the subsidies. So when you pay your taxes, you're paying the next price for food. The third price is the medical payment. It comes when you see a doctor for foodborne illness. And over the last 20 years, 62 million people per year got foodborne illness. 255,000 of them went to the hospital every year. 5,000 died every year. The fourth payment is the disease payment. Numerous ailments are food-related, such as obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and cancer. More than 2 million people per year develop antibiotic-resistant infections, and 23,000 people die every year. Antibiotic-resistant infections are a direct result of the overuse of antibiotics in rearing meat animals. Over 80% of our antibiotics are used on animal production, and they're the same antibiotics that you use to take care of your ailment. The final, fifth payment you make is the cleanup payment. When agricultural pollutants are discovered or people are poisoned from contaminated food, the farming or chemical corporation usually declares bankruptcy. And we saw that in Bhopal, India. Those people walked away from that disaster. Right? So, just like we did with Wall Street and the mortgage meltdown, we're going to pay for all the cleanup of agriculture. So that's the fifth payment. We individually can't decide to change the cars, trucks, and buses, or choose not to mine coal, or use polluting coal and frack gas in industry. Those decisions are made by CEOs and upper-level management of those industries. We can and should petition and demonstrate against the bad practices of these polluting industries, but changing them in the short term is proving to be difficult, even if we do go to jail for it. But we can fix agriculture by our choices in what we eat. Stop eating factory farm meat, pesticide-laden vegetables, and genetically modified foods. Eat organic fruits, vegetables, milk products, and meat. Eat range-fed beef, chicken, turkey, pork, and lamb. Buy as much locally produced food as possible, since food in the supermarket travels from 1,500 to 3,000 miles, and fresh food may be several days old. Since factory farming is by far the most greenhouse gas polluting sector of the economy, we must change our system of agriculture. If we don't change farming, we cannot deal with climate change. If we don't change farming, we cannot deal with climate change. We cannot pretend that these problems are going to solve themselves, or that industrial agriculture is going to finally wake up and solve these problems for us. It's up to us. We are the climate change elephant in the room that no decision makers will talk about, and that we personally don't talk about very much. We all need to admit that our food system is in trouble. We all need to change our attitudes, change our diets, and take responsibility for averting climate disaster. In my experience, I have to tell you, you will love the dietary changes you make. Bon appetit.